is a northern Arctic location, predominantly indigenous populations. And then when I came to Alberta, I came to the big city of Calgary, and that's when I first really started to get exposed to major city complexities and those types of problems. I was born in a small town in the East Coast, and so this was my first real exposure, personally and professionally, to a major center and what comes with that. So most of my career has been persons crime. So I started in general duty patrol, where everybody does start, and then I moved on to our homicide unit, plain clothes or general investigation section, where we just kind of do soup to nuts of everything that's complex and a little more than GD members can handle. Took some time in some property crime and auto theft, and then now I'm currently in our innovative order enforcement team, which our responsibility is our international airports in our province, as well as the Canada-US border that matches up with Montana. I've been a crisis negotiator for the last 10 years. Kidnap certified means that there's just different ways of doing negotiations. So we not only deal with the people in crisis, but we also deal with kidnappers and the like. And as well, yes, last year I was awarded, which is, I'm very proud of, the Justice Canada Excellence Victim-Centered Policing Award. Okay, enough about me. I think I hate to go. So when I first came to Alberta, one of my first roles here was in the General Investigations Unit, and that actually was my first exposure to sex work through either my professional or personal life. What it was is, in and around the Edmonton area, which is kind of our capital and our northern major center, we had a number of sex workers that were either missing or had been found murdered in the surrounding area of Edmonton. As a result, the RCMP created a project called Project Care. And part of that was to investigate these found human remains and obviously the missing, yet to be located sex workers, as well as trying to create an outreach program that reached out to that community that we really didn't have a good relationship with, our fault, and try and build inroads in that community so that we could work with them instead of working against them. So that was my first exposure to actually going out and meeting with individuals that were involved in sex work, victims of human trafficking, and just getting to know them as a person, as opposed to just either how it used to be thought of as either a co-conspirator or just a sole victim of a crime. So that was what kind of built the foundation of my interest in human trafficking and trying to steer my career towards this type of I guess, development in myself. So what are the objectives of today? So I want to take some time to overview some of the technology that's out there being used either by us or is out there globally. I want to talk a little bit about how AI is helping us now and where I think AI can help us moving forward from the law enforcement lens. What are the concerns and what expanding that AI toolkit could cause for issues or things that we might want to be aware of now. And then I want to open it up. I don't have all the answers. I'm not an AI professional. I do use it in my day-to-day activities, but I know that there is so many people out there that have more different views, different perspectives that I want to try and talk about here today so that we can all go back to our various professional careers and start more of a conversation about what it should look like, what it is, and what we need to be mindful of moving forward. I think the biggest mistake that we can make is to assume that someone else is going to take the lead on this and develop the right solution for what I believe is a constantly evolving problem. So what is out there now? So these are the ones that I'm familiar with. If you do a Google search right now, you're going to find pages and pages of tech companies that are advertising that they have the best human trafficking tool that should be used by entities and law enforcement and all that. So, which in and of itself, I think, is a challenge. I think this is a competitive market. I think there's a lot of people pushing stuff out. And I think we need to, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, I think we need to be very careful about who we I guess, run with in this world and vision of moving forward using AI to combat trafficking. So a really cool one that I think it's kind of was an early onset, and I think it was a really neat idea. So Hotels 50K is a program that was developed and created to identify hotel rooms that were posted in ads on the old back pages and now on the countless number of websites that they have advertising sexual services now. So what that did was it brought it brought the community and kind of the internet side of it all together, because what it did was it allowed the AI to crawl these web pages, find these hotel rooms to kind of create a base, but it also allowed the communities to submit pictures of their hotel rooms. So they could, take photos on vacation and submit them through this program to say, hey, this is the Marriott in Las Vegas or something like that. So it created this database that then could be used when crawling these websites to look at markers, whether it be a lamp or the pattern of the wallpaper or the sheets that were currently being used on that bed or the duvet cover, to try and identify at least the locations where these individuals were being trafficked. So I thought that was a really interesting way of allowing the community to participate in the collection of the data, as opposed to just the machine itself going out and gathering this information. This next one is traffic jam. It's used a lot by hours. So we have several different human trafficking units. So as a part of IBET, we do mostly labor trafficking and international sex trafficking, but we do have a provincial unit that does specifically sex trafficking domestically. And they use traffic jam quite often. It's used to identify victims of human trafficking through facial recognition and other aspects of AI that can assist them in identifying those markers that will help them to identify victims. Suspect technologies, because there's so many different aspects, and I don't want to preach to the choir here, but obviously these human trafficking investigations are complicated. There's many avenues to gather different types of evidence to present cases to the courts. So Suspect Technologies has created a program that allows the AI to take the digital downloads that we recover and process them to assist in identifying cell phones. So if we seize a cell phone from a trafficker, this type of technology can crawl that phone to find either photos or text messages, emails, and all of those things, contacts, to try and correlate the information to help identify victims of human trafficking. So being able to take that, and we'll talk about it a little bit as we go on here, but being able to take those, heavy workload intensive tasks and being able to allow the computer to do it frees up those investigators to do other things. So really interesting technology there. And then the one that I use the most is Spotlight. It's created by a company called Thorn. I'm not advertising Spotlight. I love it. It's what I started with, and it's what I still use today. But it allows us to crawl ads looking for victims of human trafficking. And it does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. I did a search yesterday between Monday at noon and Tuesday at noon, and in my city alone, there was 200 new ads posted in that 24-hour period. And that's a Monday or a Tuesday. That's not a weekend where we tend to see a surge in postings. So to have somebody or a group of individuals sit down and go through those 200 ads looking for indicators of human trafficking or looking for indicators of a juvenile being trafficked, it's very low intensive. So having a program that I can do just a quick search and it will bring up those types of things allows me to refine my search scope. For perhaps I'm only looking for a particular individual or I'm only looking for juveniles today. So I really like it. It allows you to set up search strings. So if I have a particular phone number, if I have a picture of an individual, maybe a girl that's suspected of being a victim of trafficking, I can input that into it and it will continually crawl new ads, old ads, looking for any indicators of that may be a connection. And if it makes a connection, it will send me a notification and say, hey, there's something here we think you should look at. So it allows me to go on and do all the other activities that I need to be doing, and yet something is still searching the database on my behalf. Okay, so I describe our human trafficking investigations as these pillars of response. And this is where I'm trying to, in my own mind, and hopefully through conversations, discussions with this group, is find ways to improve each of those pillars. So obviously we have the prevention pillar. If we can prevent trafficking from happening in the first place, I think that's a huge win. If it has happened, and we have the ability to prosecute in order to hold the traffickers accountable and dismantle these criminal organizations, then I believe that's a win as well. And I think there's a huge component of those pathways to recovery. Victims and survivors shouldn't be left, especially after a court case is concluded, positively or negatively. I think there needs to be long-term care provided and support provided to individuals who have gone through this experience. Now, I do know that that's not my area of expertise, but I do think it's important to highlight that we in law enforcement are aware that there is more than just finding, prosecuting, and then there's nothing after that. So when we talk about prevention, when it comes to education and training, I think that AI can help in the production and presentation of new education and training materials. Many different people learn in many different ways, and I don't believe that either the way that I learned or the way that some of us learn is applicable to all generations of people in all areas of unique areas of people, communities. And I think as well, our youngest generation that we have right now is learning in a very different way than we did growing up. They have lots more access to technology and lots of influence from the internet. So I think we need to tailor whatever sort of education and training that is going to be geared towards them very differently than we would have done it in the past. So having AI that could provide or at least help understand these new ways of learning could be very impactful when it comes to that prevention pillar. Then we go on to identifying predators and the traffickers. We all know that there would be no trafficking if these individuals were not able to find a pool of potential victims to exploit or abuse. And we know that they do it in a way that is very advertising, very flashy. I think that there are tangible markers in the way that they go out there and do their essentially phishing. I think that, as we'll see later, that there are things that they consistently do because it has in the past provided them with success. And if we were able to identify what those things that they are finding success in, then we will be able to track those, which would eventually narrow us to these people that are posting this type of essentially advertisement on there. And then conversely, obviously, identifying potential victims. I believe it's an ever evolving dynamic. I think that as society changes, so does what potential victims look like. I think vulnerabilities change. We have lots of geopolitical unrest in the world right now, which is creating new areas of concern that maybe we didn't anticipate earlier. And I think that we need to be able to pivot and evolve to accept those new areas of vulnerability and start watching those as well to ensure that individuals are not being preyed upon that we aren't even aware of. So I think that that's another area that AI might be able to assist us. When it comes to prosecution, from a law enforcement perspective, human trafficking investigations are some of the most complicated and resource-intense investigations that we take on. The elements required to prove a case covers most aspects of evidence gathering. So where you may have a simple break and enter where you're looking for some forensic evidence and taking a witness statement and identifying what was stolen. When it comes to human trafficking cases, we have right from the very onset of the trying to identify, as traffickers do, potential victims. We have that grooming phase. We have that, that isolation phase. We have all different various aspects of that where evidence can be gathered either through witness statements or digitally. A lot of what we're seeing now is cell phones and computers are the keepers of this data that can prove the elements of that offense. So I think as our evidence gathering evolves, we're going to need something that can help us to correlate that information. Because the bigger these cases get, the more complex they get, the harder it is for an individual or a small group of law enforcement officers to collect that information, process that information, and then output it in a manner that the courts are accepting. So I think if we can find some ways to create efficiencies within that through AI, it would allow us to broaden our scope and take on more cases. When I talk about connecting with victims in a safe manner, obviously connecting with victims from a law enforcement perspective can put the victim at a high risk of retribution or something. Just as simple as sending somebody a text message that is intercepted by a trafficker can cause harm and risk. So I'm curious if there's an area where AI could assist us in some way or shape or form to find a way to allow us to connect with individuals that are either victims of trafficking or recently out of trafficking, that would make it safer for them to communicate with us. I think that would be important. And when we talk about, I kind of already talked about the gathering of evidence, but when I think, sorry, I'm just scrolling to the wrong ones here. When I think about the gathering of evidence, we think of initially, obviously, locating either a trafficker or a victim as the initial onset. That's usually how we get into these. Either we identify a trafficker through advertisements or we identify a potential victim through advertisements. And when I talk about traffickers advertising, I'm talking about that recruitment phase where they're flashing money, they're flashing, putting up all these things that they can do and provide to an individual who maybe is in a vulnerable state. So by being able to identify those types of ads, recruitment ads, and as well being able to identify more of these potential victim ads is going to generate more investigations. All of that has to be collected because that's the origin story for that investigation. And as we continue to process typically electronic data from these types of investigations through cell phone dumps, pings, geodata, all those types of things, all of that continues to need to be correlated. But then we get into, video recordings from hotels or Airbnbs. We get into witness evidence from individuals that are either in the circle or the victim themselves. Then we get into banking data. So once we've kind of gotten into a trafficker, the ability to identify where the money is going can help us to prove the exploitation. And all of these take time and they're all complex. And the bigger the case gets, the more sophisticated the organized crime group is, the harder it becomes for us to keep up. So that's where I really feel that having a tool that can assist us during that entire process will make us more efficient, help us process these cases faster, which would let us get back out to new cases. And then on the back end of that, the production of the disclosure. So I'm not sure how it is in the US, but when it comes to Canadian prosecutions, we have to disclose every single thing that was collected during the process of that investigation. So it can become very, time stealing to have to sit down and ensure that we have all of that data packaged in a manner in which the courts will accept. The order will say that it has to be searchable, legible, and accessible by defense, the Crown, and the courts themselves. So when you're dealing with different forms of technology and you're dealing with Apple versus IBM and all of those types of things, we need tools that will allow us to create an output that will allow everybody to access it as per the conditions put on us by the court system. And then when it comes to pathways to recovery, I think this isn't my field. I understand, as I said earlier, like I understand this has to happen. And I think there probably are avenues, and I hope that people in that social support network are looking at ways that AI can help human trafficking victims on their path to recovery. And I hope it's not just in treatment and all those types of things. Is there a possibility that we could use AI to find affordable housing for victims that are exiting or that have been able to escape their trafficking situation? I really hope that we put really heavy focus on the prevention of human trafficking and obviously the recovery from trafficking, because I think that's where we can make the most impact today. So I kind of touched on these a little bit, but how can it assist AI-assisted pillars of response? I think we as law enforcement don't do a great job of keeping up on these emerging trends, and we struggle to identify gaps when it comes to human trafficking. I always say we don't know what we don't know, and until somebody brings us new information, we struggle to identify that. So if there's a way to go out into the world and gather this information before we get from a new victim or a fellow agency or something, I think that being that proactive, trying to learn at the forefront instead of being reactive and just waiting for people to bring us stuff could be very important. It also comes from investigations that intersect with a particular field. And I think through the sharing of information that are embedded in it. So whether you have victim advocacy groups bringing us new information or your victims bringing us new information. I took a course 2 weeks ago just on the evolution of the use of emojis as a part of communication to facilitate trafficking. And although some of the common ones, there was a lot of information that I didn't know. There was a lot of emojis that are being used that I wouldn't necessarily have keyed in on if I hadn't taken that course. So I think that there is opportunities for, and with that, those are ever evolving. What we learned was that as an emoji becomes mainstream as a symbol for something, then they change it. So it's very hard for law enforcement, if we're removed from that TikTok, Instagram world, to stay up on that stuff. So I'm hoping that that's where AI can assist us. And of course, AI doesn't rest. Whereas we work our shifts and we work overtime and then we go home to our families, having a tool like I use Spotlight that can flag stuff for me and do things nonstop allows me to focus on other investigations or other aspects of investigations, whether it be writing judicial authorizations, doing interviews. That tool is always constantly doing what would normally take me hours, if not weeks, of doing. So I think that's a huge area where we could get some assistance is in constantly crawling the internet looking for these new vulnerabilities or new information that can assist our investigations. And then we talk about AI being able to provide another perspective when looking at the situational factors to determine if something is trafficking or not. So what we will typically do is we make an assessment. Obviously, if we're looking at recruitment ads, if we're looking at posted ads based on our training and experience, we're making an assessment as to whether we feel that is or is not indicators of trafficking. And sometimes we get it right and sometimes we get it wrong. And I think if we were able to create an AI that could take some of that, I guess, that inefficiencies in individuals that maybe don't have as much training or don't have as much experience in this field, if we had a consistent scrutiny tool that could look at all of these ads and all of these situations and help us to lean in one direction to the other that it's not or it is, I think it would be very important. And I think the ability to potentially remove our own personal biases from that assessment process may be beneficial as well, because I think we all come to where we are today based on our own life experiences. And with that, when you talk about, people's views on morality and people's views on just trafficking in general, I think that can bring biases that negatively impact our ability to objectively assess certain situations as to whether they are or are not trafficking. And I think if we were able to remove some of that bias, we may actually become more accurate at those types of determinations. And then could AI assist us in the creation of court files to ensure efficient and complete disclosure to the courts? I think it can. The tools that we have right now are good, but they're not great. And I think leveraging AI to be able to help us provide more fulsome and more efficient disclosure packages will help us with the successful prosecution of these cases down the road. I think we're getting there, but I really would love to see if somebody is able to create something that makes that process more efficient. So because I come from a bit of a labor trafficking background, I want to just take some time to talk about when we're developing these AI programs, a lot of the initial, interest is in sex trafficking. And I don't want us to miss out on the opportunity to create similar or the same tools for labor trafficking as well. So there are some unique differences between how these different processes of the trafficking continuum occur. So I just wanted to kind of touch on those a little bit today as well. So when we talk about recruitment, from my experience, the mediums in which they're doing the recruitment, the traffickers are doing the recruitment, are very similar. It's just the messaging that is different. So you'll have an individual on Instagram or TikTok that is posting this lavish lifestyle, living a life of luxury. And, if you come, be with me or work with me, you can have all of this as well. And we're seeing that on all the platforms you see there: Telegram, Facebook, TikTok, WhatsApp, Instagram. At the same time, we're seeing very similar advertisements for recruitment through our labor trafficking traffickers. It's just the difference is that they're offering a legitimate form of employment that obviously we learn later is not a legitimate employment opportunity. So there is some differences there. You're not going to see the flashy, lavish lifestyle in a labor trafficking ad that you would see in a sex trafficking ad. So I think there is some opportunity there for us to tailor these programs that are being created to either incorporate both or to have separate types of AI that are looking for both different. And as I said, these are usually very public because it's not usually that they're only fishing within their connected group of individuals. These are usually very broad nets that they cast. They're looking for either employees or they're looking for vulnerable victims in a very broad and public setting, which makes it very easy for us to, if we have tools, canvas those different platforms looking for those initial recruitment advertisements in hopes that will allow us to deep dive into those individuals or organized crime groups to figure out what's really going on behind the scenes once we get past that public presentation of an advertisement. So just examples of recruitment. So for sex trafficking, like I said, we're seeing very flashy. There's going to be monies, cars, vacations, as you kind of see in these things here. But within that picture alone, there are markers that could potentially lead an investigator to believe this may be a recruitment ad for trafficking. We have the crown symbol there, which can be linked to human trafficking and organized crime groups. $100 bills all stacked there. Like, I don't have those $100 bills, so I wouldn't post that many $100 bills on my Instagram feed. But it is common for these types of things to occur, and I wouldn't say that picture alone tells me that this is a human trafficking ad, but it's a foot in the door. It's a maybe I should look at this a little closer and not have to crawl all of Instagram to find this one photo. If I came into work on a Monday morning and this was just presented to me by an AI program, well, then I start here and I don't start back at the beginning of Instagram. So it gives me a kind of a leap forward and going, let me look into this today and see what I can find. And if it turns out to be nothing, then I just move on. But if it turns out to be something, then I'm so much further ahead in that timeline of trying to find out who is this person, why are they being so flashy. When it comes to the labor side of it, you're going to see just legitimate job offers. It's going to be jobs that meet the standard requirements of your employment legislation at the time. But I think what we've seen in the past is inherently a lot of traffickers will continue to recycle things that work for them. And they also, once they get comfortable, get a little lazy. So you're going to start to see markers in the way those ads are posted, in the terminology that is used that they find successful, and the advertisement of either at similar employment or similar job descriptions. I think there are opportunities there for us to find markers that are indicative of labor trafficking, feed those into the AI machine, and have them then go and search for that kind of stuff. And the big thing is we see, at least in Canada here, I'm sure it's the same, is that we see a lot of employers kind of mentioning, discussing, or hinting at the fact that they have a pathway to citizenship for our temporary foreign workers, which in and of itself is problematic because they don't actually, but the system is designed to head that way anyway. So I think there's opportunities for us to look at markers when it comes to the promises of immigration and pathways to citizenship that could help us to identify labor trafficking. And those are things I don't think you would ever see in a sex trafficking ad or recruitment ad. Or if you did, obviously, they're tailoring those ads to a different vulnerable group, such as a foreign market that is looking to come for the purposes of getting out of some geopolitical conflict. So when we talk about the grooming phase of trafficking and how that differs, so it's not going to be as public in either sex or labor trafficking, but I think it still does have public indicators, and I think those are the things that we could focus on and ensure that we are looking for these types of indicators. So we may not actually find somebody during the recruitment phase, but there may be a way and an opportunity for AI to help us find people that are in that initial grooming phase. So obviously within sex trafficking, we're going to see a sudden change in online behavior. Potentially we're going to see photographs of new luxury or travel or association with new individuals that when you look into those individuals have a history of trafficking or criminality in their background that on the surface you won't see. But if we were able to create an AI that could look for these behavioral changes in the public setting, I think there's an opportunity for us to wedge ourselves in between our potential victims and our traffickers before it actually gets to a situation where it is full-on trafficking. The problem with labor trafficking, this is my opinion, not the opinion we are seeing here, our government in general, is that the process, the hiring process in which we have in Canada right now, especially the temporary foreign worker program, it does the grooming on behalf of the employer. It provides that individual, that vulnerable individual with all of those dreams and aspirations of coming to Canada to get a new life, to be able to, provide for their families back home or bring their families with them ultimately for a better life in Canada. So it does become a little bit more difficult to, I guess, look for markers within a system that we as a government have designed, but I still think there are opportunities, and maybe not necessarily on the public end, but within the of our Service Canada or immigrant and refugee group, there's maybe some AI that we could leverage that during that application process that looks for red flags or markers or consistencies that may indicate that this is a possible situation of labor trafficking if we were to approve this work permit or if we were to approve that visa. So a lot of this behind the scenes work that is done manually by individuals working at our desks, if there was a way to crawl temporary foreign worker or visa applications looking for those markers or indicators, I think we could prevent some of these things becoming full-on trafficking.
Mark, just a heads up on 5 to 10 minutes for the session.
Sorry, I'm not sure if you were talking.
Oh, there you go. Imperfect solution. 5 to 10 minutes for the session.
Okay. Okay, so how can AI support sex and labor trafficking differ in the world of isolation? So we're going to see in both forms of trafficking, we're going to see a decline in the online social footprint of the individuals that are now entering the world of trafficking. I think you're going to see friends reaching out with little to no response. I think you're going to see a continual change in those online behaviors that are inconsistent to those individuals that know those people. So there's a way for AI to crawl and consolidate that information for us to assess or to assess on its own without obviously those biases. I think there is an opportunity there for us to engage AI in that phase of the trafficking process as well. So what about the manipulation and coercion phase? So I believe that these are almost exclusively offline for both labor and sex trafficking. You may see some forms of manipulation and postings, whether it be public discourse between two individuals. So I'm not sure exactly how AI can assist us during this phase, but I believe there's probably other people out there that may have an idea that would be encouraging to hear their thoughts on. And then when it comes to the exploitation phase, obviously we're going to start seeing online advertising and sexual services, which, as we discussed earlier, I think is a area that we could definitely heavily engage AI to help us support our investigations. But then on the converse, once an individual becomes a labor trafficking victim, they are working at the 7-Eleven or the hotel motel down the road, there's going to be very little to no online presence. So when we're developing AI to look at either both of these individually, I think we need to be aware of how sex trafficking, the online presence goes through the roof, and with labor trafficking, it completely falls off. So I'm hoping that those that are creating are aware of those differences when it comes to the exploitation phase.
Hi, Mark. Hello.
And then regardless of the online presence, that's really when the money becomes the issue and when the money starts to show us that exploitation. So having a tool that can then, once we've identified a case, start to chase the money, whether it be through, FinTrack, which is our financial tracking tool that we use here in Canada. I believe it's used in the States as well. Follow those banking transactions. We now have e-transfers and Venmo and PayPal. Like, there's so many ways to move money these days that I think we're missing a lot of opportunities to chase the money just because of the conventional ways that we've been doing it as it is. So what are the concerns with expanding the AI toolkits? What should we be aware of now and hopefully prevent in the future? I think there's a lot of concern that there's going to be a lot of growing pains with AI learning. I think if we create bad data within the AI, I think we're going to create a bad tool. And I think the worst thing we could end up with is a useless tool. And I think the best we could hope for with bad data is a useless tool, and the worst we could end up with is a tool that is dangerous. Because if we teach the AI the wrong indicators, or we teach it the wrong ways to assess, or it learns the wrong ways to assess based on bad data, then every output after there is going to be faulty. And that in and of itself could potentially create bad case law in the courts. And if the courts don't trust the use of AI in human trafficking, then I don't know where we end up going.
Is that it?
Sorry, just 1 second.
Hi, Kate.
We have a bit of a, we just ran out of time, unfortunately. We're unable to cut the feed to be able to ask questions because the audio is not quite working on our end. So unfortunately, we only have a few more minutes left if you want to, unfortunately, conclude the session. Okay, thanks so much.
So my friend on the ground has advised that we are short for time. So we'll just go through this slide here. I know there's no time for questions, and that's okay. So when we're talking about the concerns with AI, as I said, I think if we create a bad tool, it's going to create bad case law. And if the courts end up throwing out AI as a tool, that can be very challenging for us moving forward. I think there's privacy issues when we're talking about the gathering of this data and the authorities of the police to use that data or how we collect that data. So when we're talking about social media, obviously there's a lot of opportunity for the public domain and us crawling that public domain. But once we get into those having to be friends or having to have a Snap ID in order to gather this data, I think we need to be very careful about what we encourage or engage the AI tool to do on the forefront first. Because personally, I never want to gather information that I'm not allowed to have, because it just craters my case down the road. So we need to be able to put buffers in place to prevent it from gathering stuff that we're not authorized to have. And I think there's a learning curve. I think AI is going to need time to learn human trafficking and the indicators of human trafficking. And during that learning phase, I'm not sure how we scrutinize and filter those false positives during that learning process. I want to make sure that what we are actioning is accurate and proper information, and to chase down false leads while AI learns is a human resource stealer at the best of times. And then again, we talk about the courts. Are they going to openly accept the use of AI as an accurate and reliable tool during our investigations? I think initially there's going to be some very apprehension about the use of AI. We've already seen with like ChatGPT and some of the challenges that we're seeing as that rolls out globally and as people are using it for different things that were not initially thought of. So I'm wondering if there's something we need to do there to ensure that what we are presenting initially is accurate and reliable so that the courts accept it. I never thought of the environmental concerns. Obviously, this is a computer system, and this computer system is now going to be running 24/7 globally across the world in all corners of law enforcement. What are the environmental concerns of the development, the creation of this hardware that's going to do this for us? And then the big one for me is data breaches. We know the data breaches are going to happen. So now we have collected all of this information about our victims and our survivors, and we're holding that information. What happens when there is a breach and that information gets out into cyberspace and is now in somebody else's power and control to use? And I think a big thing that I wanted to touch on the questions, but I think we really need to talk to victims and survivors of trafficking and get their opinion on these AI tools. I think they have a place at the table when we talk about the use of AI in combating human trafficking, and I hope that whoever is developing this is using that avenue of speaking with the people that have experienced it to ensure that this meets their needs as well, and not just the law enforcement need. So I apologize that we're cutting short. I appreciate you all sitting through this. I hope this was helpful. I hope this generates more conversation down the road. And I really look forward to what the tech world is going to come out with in the future.
Hello. I don't think Mark can hear me, but we're trying to.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, you can. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for your remarks. We again apologize for the technology issues, but that was an excellent summary. Kate has informed me that this has been just a great session. So now, again, thank you again for your expertise. I don't know if you heard my introduction before, but I was so inspired by the work you did in 2021 in Calgary on that labor trafficking case with ACT Alberta. Of course, it's a great example of collaboration. So thank you for your remarks. And with that, I wish you were here to kind of join us for coffee in person. But if you guys can grab your coffees and teas and then settle into your next workshop room, we really appreciate that. Thanks all.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And my contact information is on the
excellent. Thank you so much.
Screen if you need it.
Yeah, it's visible. Great. Thank you.